The day has ended, and night gently unfolds. The sky, once filled with the bright light of the sun, now softens into shades of deep blue and silver. The first stars begin to glimmer, quiet guardians of the night. The air cools. The world slows. And creation itself seems to whisper, "Rest." This is the hour when the heart begins to release its burdens. When worries loosen their grip. When the soul leans toward peace. It is here, in the hush of evening, that we find ourselves closest to the quiet voice of God. All around, the gentle rhythm of life continues. The crickets sing their simple song. The wind drifts softly through leaves. The waters in the distance move with steady flow. Each sound, each motion, each quiet moment is an invitation. An invitation to rest. An invitation to trust. For in the stillness, we are reminded that we are not alone. Even as the world grows silent, God remains near. His presence surrounds us like a soft blanket of peace. His care is steady, like the stars that never fail to shine. Tonight, as you prepare to rest, you are invited to step into this ancient story. A story of faith upon troubled waters. A story where the human heart wavered, yet found safety in the hand of God. It is the story of the sea, the storm, and the Savior who brings calm. But before the waves rise, before the winds stir, we begin here, with rest. Close your thoughts to the noise of the day. Allow each care to drift further away. Every worry, every task left unfinished, every question of tomorrow. Let it all rest in the hands of the one who governs all things. Breathe deeply. Let each breath remind you of God's gift of life. Let each exhale be the release of burdens you were never meant to carry alone. The disciples, too, once faced a night such as this. A night when the sea stretched wide before them, and the sky above glowed with stars. A night when their hearts longed for peace but were tested by storm. And yet, at the beginning, there was quiet. There was stillness. There was the gentle rhythm of the sea under the moonlight. Imagine the scene. The small wooden boat rests near the shore. Ropes creak softly as they are untied. The disciples climb aboard with weary bodies but hopeful hearts. The water shimmers like glass in the moonlight. The air is calm. The world seems hushed. They do not yet know the storm that waits. But for now, they are wrapped in the gentle promise of peace. This is where the story begins. Not in chaos, but in calm. Not in fear, but in stillness. For every journey with God begins here. With trust. With quiet surrender. With the willingness to step forward, even when the path is unknown. And so, tonight, your own journey into rest begins the same way. With a heart that loosens its grip on fear. With a mind that chooses trust over worry. With a soul that remembers, the God who stilled the waters is the same God who watches over you now. Let the gentle thought settle over you. You are safe in His care. You are held by His love. You are guided by His hand. Even when the waves of life grow strong, even when winds rise without warning, you are never alone. For tonight, you are being invited into peace. Peace that does not depend on circumstances. Peace that is steady, enduring, unshaken. Peace that flows like the calm waters at the beginning of this story. As your body grows heavy with rest, as your thoughts soften, as your spirit leans toward the quiet, let the story unfold. Let the journey of trust and faith carry you. Let the whispers of God's presence guide you. And as the boat pushes gently away from the shore, and the sea stretches wide before them, so too may your heart drift into stillness tonight, knowing that the One who holds the waters also holds you. The boat moved slowly upon the quiet waters, its wooden frame creaking softly, each oar dipping into the sea with a steady rhythm. The disciples spoke little, their voices hushed as if the night itself asked for silence. Above them, the heavens stretched wide and endless. A canopy of stars glimmered like scattered diamonds. The moon traced a silver path across the waters, a gentle light guiding them into the heart of the lake. The Sea of Galilee was familiar to many of them. Fishermen who had spent their lives upon its surface. Men who knew its moods, its calm mornings, its sudden tempests, its shifting winds. But tonight, at the beginning, all was still. The boat glided as if carried on glass, the ripples spreading gently, fading into silence. It was a night that invited the weary to believe, if only for a moment, that peace would last forever. Their teacher was not with them. He had stayed behind upon the mountain to pray, to speak in solitude with his Father. They trusted him, and yet his absence was felt. The presence of Jesus had always steadied their hearts. His words calmed fears. His eyes carried peace. His steps marked the way. Without him, the night seemed deeper, the shadows longer, the silence heavier. Still, they pressed forward, rowing across the wide sea, the shore behind them fading into darkness, the far shore not yet in sight. Each man carried his own thoughts. Some wondered about the crowds they had left earlier that day. Others remembered the miracle of bread and fish that had filled thousands upon thousands. Still others simply longed for rest. But beneath their quiet thoughts was a deeper truth. A truth they could not yet see. That the one who prayed upon the mountain also kept his eyes upon them. The night deepened. The stars grew brighter as the world fell silent. The steady rhythm of oars was all that marked time. And then the air shifted. At first it was subtle, a whisper of wind across the surface of the water, a cool breath stirring the stillness. The disciples paused, looking around. The sea, once like glass, trembled with small ripples. They exchanged glances, for they knew how quickly peace could give way to storm. The breeze strengthened, pushing against the boat. Waves lifted slightly, rocking the vessel with unease. The men gripped the sides, adjusting their balance, their hearts alert, remembering how fragile life upon this sea could be. Still they rowed, but the waters no longer yielded easily. Each pull of the oar grew harder, each movement resisted by the swelling waves. Dark clouds began to form at the edges of the horizon, creeping across the sky, covering the gentle stars. The silver path of moonlight was swallowed in shadow, leaving the boat adrift in growing darkness. The sound of the wind rose. What was once a whisper became a voice. What was once a breeze became a force. The waters, restless now, slapped against the wooden frame, spraying cool mist into the air. The night, once peaceful, turned heavy with threat. Fear crept into their hearts. For though they were men of the sea, they were also men of flesh and weakness. They had seen storms rise like this before. Storms that swallowed boats. Storms that silenced voices forever. And though they remembered miracles, though they had walked with their teacher and seen his power, still, the storm before them felt larger than their faith. The boat rocked harder, each wave rising higher, the sky rumbling with distant thunder. They strained against the oars, muscles burning, hands blistering, hearts pounding. The waters no longer obeyed their strength. The storm was greater than their power. And yet, though they could not see it, though the storm hid it from their eyes, there, upon the mountain, the one they loved still prayed. He had not forgotten them. He had not turned his gaze away. Every gust of wind, every crashing wave, every fearful heartbeat was known to him. But in the boat, all they felt was the weight of the storm. The wind howled. The sea rose. Fear pressed heavily upon their souls. And still, the night pressed on. The storm gathered strength. The boat now heaved and groaned as if it too feared the waters that surrounded it. Waves rose like walls of darkness, crashing down with thunderous force. The disciples clung to the wooden beams, their garments soaked, their hands trembling. The night sky, once filled with stars, had vanished behind a curtain of clouds. Lightning flashed in the distance, breaking the darkness with sudden bursts of white fire. Thunder rolled, echoing across the wide sea. Every gust of wind seemed to mock their strength. Every wave seemed to threaten their lives. Their voices rose above the storm. Cries of warning. Prayers half-formed. Words of desperation swallowed by the roar of wind and sea. The disciples were no strangers to storms. Yet this one seemed different. Heavier. Stronger. A storm that tested not only their bodies, but their faith. Fear tightened its grip upon their hearts. They remembered his words, his miracles, the times he had calmed the sea before. But in his absence, their memories felt fragile. What good are memories of peace when the storm surrounds you? When your boat groans under the weight of waters? When the night offers no sign of dawn? Their arms ached as they fought against the waves. Each oar a battle. Each moment a question of survival. Water poured into the boat, pooling at their feet. Their voices grew hoarse with shouts and prayers. The storm pressed harder. And still he was not there. But even in the storm, unseen and unknown to them, he watched. From his place of prayer upon the mountain, his eyes never left them. The distance between them was nothing to him. The sea, the storm, the darkness, all lay under his authority. Though they did not yet know it, help was already on its way. The night dragged on. Hours stretched endlessly. Their strength waned. Some held fast to hope. Others yielded to despair. Yet all felt the storm as a weight too great to bear. The sea seemed endless. The storm unending. And then, through the veil of rain and wind, something moved. At first, they thought it was the sea itself playing tricks upon their weary eyes. A shape rising, shifting, carried upon the waters. But the figure drew nearer. Calm amidst chaos. Steady where all else trembled. The storm roared, yet this figure did not stumble. The waves rose, yet they seemed to bow beneath his steps. The disciples' hearts pounded with terror. For what could walk upon water but a spirit? A shadow of the night. Fear multiplied. They cried out in alarm, their voices rising in panic. Yet the figure moved closer, undisturbed, unwavering. The storm itself seemed to falter around him. And then a voice, clear as the breaking of dawn, cutting through the roar of wind and wave. Take courage. It is I. Do not be afraid. The words sank into their storm-tossed hearts. Fear began to loosen. Wonder began to rise. It was no spirit. It was no vision. It was him. Their teacher. Their Lord. The storm still raged. The waves still rose. But something within them shifted. For if he could walk upon the waters, then surely the sea was not greater than his power. Surely the storm was not beyond his command. Where his voice was heard, fear gave way to faith. The disciples stared in awe, their trembling replaced by astonishment, their cries fading into silence. The storm had not yet ended, but peace had entered their hearts. For he was near. He was with them. And no storm could change that truth. Peter's heart pounded, his eyes fixed upon the figure who moved across the restless waves. The storm still howled. The boat still rocked. Yet his gaze did not waver from the one who came nearer. Something stirred within him, a mixture of boldness and trembling, faith and doubt woven together. And he lifted his voice above the storm. Lord, if it is truly you, command me to come to you upon the water. The others looked at him in disbelief, their hands still clinging to the sides of the boat, their faces pale with fear. But Peter's soul longed for more than safety. He longed for closeness to his master. And then came the reply. Simple, steady, filled with authority.
Come?
The word lingered in the air, cutting through the roar of wind, carrying with it a power greater than the storm. Peter's heart leapt, yet his body trembled. He grasped the side of the boat, lifted one leg over the edge, and for a moment the waters seemed to wait. His foot touched the sea, and the waves, which had swallowed ships and broken men, did not claim him. Instead, beneath his feet was something firm, something unseen, held together by the command of the one who had spoken. Step by step, he moved forward, the sea rolling beneath him, the wind pressing against him. Yet still he walked. Each breath came heavy, each step a miracle. The boat drifted behind him. The storm raged around him. And before him was the calm and steady presence of his Lord. The others watched in awe, their fear momentarily forgotten. For Peter was no longer clinging to wood and rope. He was walking upon waters that none could tame. Yet as he drew nearer, the storm reminded him of its power. The wind lashed against his face. The spray of the sea blinded his eyes. He looked away, just for a moment, his gaze shifting from the one before him to the chaos around him. And in that single moment, fear returned. The waters no longer felt steady beneath his feet. The unseen path vanished. He sank, gasping, flailing, the sea rising to swallow him. His cry broke through the night. Lord, save me. It was not a prayer of eloquence, not a carefully formed petition, but the desperate cry of a soul sinking. And before the waters could claim him, a hand reached out. Firm, unshaken, unwavering. It grasped him with strength, lifted him with ease. And in that grasp, all fear melted away. Peter's eyes met his, and the voice that had called him now spoke again, gentle, yet filled with truth. O you of little faith, Why did you doubt? The sea still surged. The winds still blew. Yet in his hand Peter was safe. Together they moved toward the boat. The storm raging, but unable to overcome the one who walked upon its waves. The disciples reached to pull them aboard. Their faces filled with awe. Their hearts trembling not from fear, but from reverence. And as he stepped into the boat, the storm itself obeyed. The winds hushed. The waves stilled. The sea fell into silence as if it had never known rage. The silence was deep, profound, a peace that stretched beyond the waters, beyond the night. And in that silence, the disciples bowed low, their voices uniting in worship. Truly, you are the Son of God. Their fear had turned to faith, their despair to worship. For the one who commands the waters had drawn near. And in that truth, their weary hearts found rest. The sea lay calm once more, the sudden stillness wrapping itself around the weary disciples like a cloak. The waves that had towered over them only moments before now stretched out smooth and quiet, reflecting the pale light of the moon. The storm had not simply weakened. It had ceased, silenced by his presence, stilled by his command. The men sat breathless, water dripping from their garments, hands still trembling from the struggle, hearts pounding from all they had seen. Their eyes never left him, the teacher they had followed, the one they had trusted, had revealed himself again in a way that words could never capture. What kind of man is this? They wondered within. That even the winds and the seas obey him. Peter, still damp from the waters, sat close, his chest rising and falling with each heavy breath, his mind replaying the steps he had taken upon the waves. The fear, the doubt, the sinking, and then the hand that saved him. Though the storm had ceased, the lesson remained, a lesson written upon his soul. Fear had gripped them all. Fear had filled their eyes with shadows. Fear had told them that the storm was greater than their faith. But the presence of the Lord had shown otherwise. It was not the storm that held true power. It was not the sea that defined their fate. It was the one who walked upon the waters, the one who lifted Peter from the depths, the one who stilled the winds with a word. They had seen storms before, but never had they understood so deeply that storms are not the final word. For even in the fiercest tempests, there is a presence greater than the waves. As the boat glided gently across the calm waters, their hearts shifted from terror to trust. The memory of the wind still lingered. The sound of thunder still echoed faintly in their minds. Yet above those memories rose a stronger voice. The voice that said, "Take courage. It is I. Do not be afraid." And that voice, once spoken, never truly leaves the heart. It echoes still in every soul that has known fear, in every life that has faced storm. It is the whisper of peace in troubled times, the steady assurance that no wave is greater than His hand. The disciples had feared for their lives, and yet, what they found was greater than safety. They found a deeper faith, a trust that reached beyond the storm. For storms will rise again, but so too will His presence remain. This is the lesson hidden within the night. That faith is not the absence of fear, but the choice to trust in the midst of it. That courage is not found in strength of body, but in the quiet surrender of the heart to the One who reigns above the waters. And so, their worship that night was not born of obligation. It was born of awe, of gratitude, of reverence. Their words rose like incense into the quiet sky. Truly, you are the Son of God. The sea bore their vessel onward. The night stretched around them in deep silence, and in that silence they found peace. For the One who had stilled the storm was with them, and that was enough. And even now, as this story lingers in the quiet of night, its truth remains. The storms of life may rise, the winds may roar, fear may press upon the soul, but there is always one who walks upon the waters, one who extends His hand when we sink, one who speaks peace into the fiercest storm. Let the heart rest in this truth tonight, that the presence of Christ is greater than the storm, that His hand is never far, that His voice still whispers, even now. Take courage. It is I. Do not be afraid. High upon the mountain, long before the storm had risen, Jesus had gone apart to pray. The crowds had been sent away. The noise of the day had faded. And in the solitude of that quiet place, He lifted His heart to the Father. The night stretched around Him, filled with the chorus of creation, the rustle of leaves in the evening breeze, the song of night birds echoing faintly through the valleys. While His disciples labored upon the waters below, He lingered in communion with the One who sent Him. His prayers were not hurried, not bound by the urgency of time. Each word rose like incense, steady and unbroken. Each silence filled with perfect trust. He prayed for strength to continue the work ahead. He prayed for the will of the Father to be done. And He prayed for those whom He had chosen, the very ones now straining at the oars, their hearts shaken by waves, their souls trembling with fear, were even then being carried upon His heart in prayer. Though the sea separated them, He was never far from them. Though the storm raged around their small vessel, His gaze never left them. Every gust of wind, every crashing wave, every cry of fear that rose from their lips was known to Him. They felt abandoned in their struggle, but in truth, they were being upheld in unseen ways. The stillness of the mountain was a sharp contrast to the chaos of the waters. Here, he knelt in peace. There, they fought against the storm. And yet the two were bound together. For his prayers were their unseen shelter. His intercession was their hidden strength. As the night deepened, the sea below swelled with fury. But the one who prayed did not waver. His communion with the Father was unbroken. His care for his own unfailing. The storm had not caught him unaware. The winds had not hidden them from his sight. Every moment of their struggle was already known, already carried, already held in his eternal plan. And when the hour was right, he descended from the mountain. Not hurried, not frantic, not shaken. With calm steps he moved toward the shore. And from the shore, he stepped onto the waters. The sea that threatened to consume his friends lay beneath his feet like a servant bowing before its master. The waves did not swallow him. The wind did not bend him. For the Creator had entered the creation, and all things bent to his will. In the boat, the disciples trembled with fear. On the mountain, he had prayed for their faith. Upon the waters, he came to meet them. This is the rhythm of his love. Unseen in prayer, yet unceasing in care. Distant in body, yet near in presence. Silent in the storm, yet ready to speak peace with a word. And even now, across the ages, the pattern remains. When storms rise in the life of his children, he is never far. When the night feels heavy and endless, his prayers remain. When fear presses hard, his hand is near to rescue. The mountain of prayer. The storm upon the waters. The hand stretched out to save. Each moment is a thread in the tapestry of his love. A love that is watchful, constant, and eternal. The disciples had not known it as they rode against the waves. They had not felt it as fear pressed upon their souls. But when he appeared upon the sea, they understood what had been true all along. They were never abandoned, never forgotten, never unseen. And so, the memory of the storm became also the memory of his faithfulness. The night of terror became also the night of revelation. For the one who prayed upon the mountain was also the one who walked upon the waters. And the one who reached into the depths to lift Peter would never cease to uphold them. The boat continued onward, carried now by calm waters. Their hearts hushed by the awe of what they had witnessed. And above them, the stars shone again, as if creation itself rejoiced in the stillness. The sea stretched wide and silent now, the storm a memory lingering at the edges of their thoughts. The disciples sat quietly in the boat, their breath slowing, their trembling fading, their eyes still drawn to him. The air felt different, as though even creation itself rested under his presence. And while their bodies remained weary, their hearts had begun to learn a truth far deeper than the waters they crossed. For they realized in those moments that they had never been beyond his watch, never outside his care, never lost in the storm, though their eyes had told them otherwise. Even when the winds rose, even when the waves threatened, even when fear whispered its loudest, he had known where they were. He had seen them from the mountain. He had carried them in prayer. He had come to them in the very heart of the storm. This divine watchfulness was not only for that night. It was the very character of the one they followed. His gaze was never absent. His care was never withdrawn. Every detail of their lives, every cry of their hearts, every struggle of their faith was known to him. They remembered the words he had spoken before. About the birds of the air, cared for without worry. About the lilies of the field, clothed in splendor beyond kings. If such small creatures were known and provided for, how much more were they, his chosen, his beloved, seen and held by him? As the calm waters rippled gently beneath the boat, they felt the weight of this truth settle over them like a warm mantle. They were never alone. Not in the quiet. Not in the storm. Not in the unknown future that still lay ahead. His eyes were upon them always. His hand ready to uphold. His presence steady and sure. For the disciples, this night became more than a moment of rescue. It became a revelation. They saw not only his power, but his heart. Not only his authority, but his compassion. The sea had tested them, but it had also shown them the depth of his care. And in the stillness that followed, their souls found peace. The boat drifted steadily, no longer at war with the waves. The stars returned in their brilliance, as though the heavens themselves testified to the order restored by his hand. The night, once filled with terror, had been transformed into holy quiet. In that quiet, faith deepened. The disciples had feared abandonment, but discovered eternal nearness. They had feared destruction, but discovered a power that saves. They had feared the storm, but discovered the one who commands the storm. And for those who would hear this story in generations to come, the truth would remain the same. That no night is too dark for his gaze. That no storm is too fierce for his hand. That no distance is too great for his presence. He is the shepherd who watches over his flock, the guardian who neither sleeps nor slumbers, the Lord whose eyes are upon his children always. And so the disciples, wrapped in this realization, sat in reverent silence, their hearts stilling, their fears dissolving, their spirits leaning into the peace of his watchful presence. The waters carried them onward. The night stretched gently above, and within their souls grew the quiet assurance that they would never again face storm alone. The calm that followed was deep. Yet within each heart lingered the memory of what had just been. The sea was now smooth, reflecting moonlight like polished glass. But they could still feel the tremor of fear in their bodies. Still taste the salt of the storm upon their lips. Still hear the echo of thunder in their minds. Peace surrounded them outwardly, but inwardly they wrestled with what the storm had revealed. For storms are not only winds and waves. They are also the battles within. Fear that rises without warning. Doubts that press like heavy clouds. Anxieties that swell like waves against the soul. And though the sea now rested, the lesson of the storm pressed deeper, reminding them that such trials would return again. Life with their master had never been free of struggle. From the hostility of crowds, to the scorn of rulers, to the weight of their own weaknesses, they knew more storms awaited them. Storms greater even than the sea. Storms of faith, storms of endurance, storms that would demand their trust again and again. And yet this night had planted within them a truth unshakable, that the one who had walked upon the waters would remain their shelter in every storm to come. They remembered how quickly the winds had risen, how suddenly peace had been taken, how helpless they had felt as they strained at the oars. Storms give no warning. They arrive with force. They strip away control. They reveal what lies hidden within the heart. And in that revelation, they had seen both their weakness and his strength. The sea had seemed to rage against them. The darkness had sought to consume them. But then came his voice, and everything shifted. The storm had not ceased at once, yet his words had already begun to calm their souls. Take courage. It is I. Do not be afraid. Even before the winds obeyed, even before the waters stilled, peace had entered their hearts. This is the mystery of his presence. That peace does not wait for storms to end. Peace begins the moment he is near. And as the disciples sat in the quiet now, they could still feel the weight of that peace upon them. The memory of the raging waves no longer filled them with terror, but with awe. For it was in the midst of that very fury that he had revealed his glory. Storms, they began to understand, are not signs of abandonment. They are moments of revelation. For in the storm, they saw what they could not see in calm waters. They saw their need. They saw their frailty. And above all, they saw the one who holds power over all creation. The sea that had once threatened them now served as a reminder, a testimony written upon the waters, that nothing is beyond his reach, that no chaos is beyond his command, that even when fear overwhelms, his presence is steady, his voice unbroken, his hand strong to save. And so, though the storm had ended, its lesson endured. The disciples would carry it into every step of their journey. And in nights yet to come, when other storms would rise, they would remember this night, and the one who came to them upon the waters. The calm that followed was not only for the sea, it was for their souls. A calm that assured them that storms may roar, but they are never final. A calm that whispered that his presence is stronger than fear. A calm that invited them, and all who would follow after, to rest in the certainty of his watchful love. And so the night deepened once more. The waters whispered softly around the boat. The stars shone with quiet brilliance above. And within each disciple, faith grew stronger than it had ever been before. Through the veil of night, when the storm had seemed its fiercest, they had seen him. At first only a shape, a shadow upon the waters. Their eyes straining, their hearts racing. The storm had filled them with terror, but the sight of that figure moving across the waves had filled them with something deeper. A fear that was almost wonder. The sea tossed and roared, yet he was steady. The wind lashed and howled, yet he did not falter. The waves rose like mountains, yet they bowed beneath his steps. Every movement he made was calm, unhurried, sovereign. As though the chaos itself was nothing but a servant to his command. Their cries had risen in panic. "It is a spirit," they shouted, trembling with dread. For what mortal man could walk upon the waters? What flesh could stand where only the depths should reign? But then his voice came. Clear, unwavering, cutting through the storm like light through darkness. "Take courage. It is I. Do not be afraid." And at once, the mystery was revealed. It was no spirit of the night. No phantom of fear. It was their Lord. The one who had healed the sick, who had multiplied the loaves, who had spoken of the kingdom with authority. Now here he was, walking upon the very waters that threatened their lives. The disciples' fear melted into astonishment. Their trembling gave way to awe. The storm had not yet stilled. The winds still tore against them. The sea still churned. Yet in his presence, peace already began to grow within them. For if he could tread upon the chaos itself, then the chaos was no longer master over them. The figure upon the waters drew nearer. His form illuminated by the pale glow of lightning flashing across the sky. Each step was steady, unbroken, untouched by the fury around him. And the closer he came, the smaller the storm seemed. Not because the winds had weakened, but because his presence revealed their true powerlessness. The disciples leaned forward, eyes wide, hearts pounding. The water slapped against the boat, but they scarcely noticed. The spray stung their faces, but they felt only the wonder of beholding him. In that moment, time seemed to pause. The sea raged, yet their gaze was fixed. The storm howled, yet his voice echoed louder in their hearts. "It is I. Do not be afraid." Those words did not only quiet their fear. They awakened their faith. They reminded them that storms may roar, but he is greater. That waters may rise, but he is sovereign. That no darkness, no chaos, no storm could erase the truth of his presence. And so, as he drew near, the boat became less a vessel of terror and more a sanctuary of revelation. They were not abandoned. They were not forgotten. The very one they longed for had come to them, walking through the very storm they feared most. For this is his way. Not always to remove the storm at once, but to come in the midst of it. not always to silence the winds immediately, but to speak peace into the hearts of those who tremble. Not always to keep the waters calm, but to show that even the raging waves are under his feet. The disciples would never forget this sight. The memory of their Lord, steady upon the storm, would be etched into their souls forever. And for all who would hear this story in ages to come, the image would remain the same. That when chaos surrounds, when fear overwhelms, when storms rise without warning, there is one who walks upon the waters, unshaken, unafraid, unbroken, and his words still linger, carried through every generation, whispered into every storm. Take courage. It is I. Do not be afraid. Their hearts beat hard within their chests. Every breath shallow, every thought consumed by the sight before them. The storm had not yet faded. The waves still rose and fell, crashing against the sides of the boat. The wind still howled through the night. Yet all of it seemed smaller now, for their eyes were fixed upon him, the one who moved across the waters as though the storm itself bowed to his will. Astonishment gripped them. They had seen him heal the sick, restore the blind, raise the lame. They had watched him break bread and feed thousands from nearly nothing. But this was unlike anything their hearts could comprehend. Nature itself was bending before him. The laws that governed sea and storm gave way to his command. The disciples looked at one another, their faces pale with awe. Words faltered upon their lips. They tried to speak, but the language of men could not contain what they witnessed. Fear and wonder mingled within them. Not the fear of perishing, but the fear that comes when one realizes they stand before the holy. Every flash of lightning revealed his form more clearly. The rain soaked his robe, yet he walked untouched. The waves lifted high, yet his steps were steady. The storm itself, which threatened to break them, seemed powerless before him. Whispers rose among them. What manner of man is this, that even the sea obeys him? But in their hearts, the question had already begun to find its answer. For no mere man could tread where he walked. No ordinary teacher could stand where only the Creator holds authority. And yet, here he was, their teacher, their Lord, their friend. The same hands that had broken bread with them, the same voice that had spoken parables by the shore, now revealed in glory that shook the soul. Peter's eyes burned with longing. A mixture of fear and desire stirred within him. He wanted to draw nearer, to step out, to taste the miracle himself. The others, still clinging to the boat, watched with breath held, uncertain what might unfold. But even before Peter moved, or already filled the vessel, they began to sense that this night would mark them forever. That nothing in their lives could remain the same after such a revelation. The storm had forced them to the edges of fear. but it had also carried them into the depths of faith. They realized, trembling, that they were not merely following a teacher of wisdom, not merely a prophet of old. They were beholding the one whose steps rested upon the very waters of creation, the one whose voice carried the weight of eternity, the one whose presence alone brought peace where chaos reigned. Their astonishment swelled until it could not be contained. Their eyes widened. Their voices whispered prayers. Their hearts bowed in reverence. And though the storm raged on, within their souls worship had already begun. They no longer saw only the terror of the night. They saw him. And seeing him changed everything. Peter could not remain seated. His heart surged within him, restless, burning with a mixture of trembling fear and unshakable desire. The others clung to the boat, still overwhelmed, but Peter leaned forward, eyes fixed upon the figure walking through storm and spray. Every instinct told him to stay where it was safe, to cling to the vessel that kept them afloat. Yet something deeper whispered within him, a longing to be nearer, to step where his Lord stepped, to walk in the impossible path laid before his eyes. He lifted his voice above the howl of the winds. Lord, if it is truly you, command me to come to you upon the water. The words hung heavy in the stormy air. Bold, desperate, filled with faith and yet trembling with uncertainty. The disciples turned toward him in shock. Their fear deepened by the thought of leaving even the fragile safety of the boat. But Peter's gaze did not waver from the one upon the waters. Then came the answer. A single word, spoken with quiet strength.
Come.
That word was like a key turning in Peter's soul, unlocking courage where fear had dwelt, stirring faith where doubt had lingered. Without hesitation, he moved to the edge of the boat, hands gripping the wet wood, body leaning into the storm. One leg lifted, then the other. And for the first time in his life, his feet touched the surface of the sea not as a swimmer, but as a walker. The waters held him, not by nature, but by command. Each step forward was a miracle, each breath a prayer, each heartbeat a testimony that the word of his master was greater than the power of the storm. The disciples watched in stunned silence, their eyes wide, their hands frozen on the sides of the boat. Peter walked upon waves that had moments before threatened to devour them. Step after step, he drew nearer to his Lord. The storm still raging, the wind still roaring, yet his focus fixed upon the one who had called. Every fiber of his being trembled with wonder. Each step was both victory and surrender. He was not walking by strength of body, nor by skill of fisherman, but by faith alone, fragile yet real, upheld by the word spoken to him. And in that fragile faith, he found himself closer than he had ever imagined. Closer to the presence of Christ. closer to the power of the impossible. Closer to the revelation that trust is not about safety within the boat, but about stepping out upon the waters where he waits. For those moments, Peter lived what few have ever known. The impossible became possible. The storm became pathway. The waters became firm beneath his feet. Because his Lord had spoken. And Peter obeyed. The storm still raged, but faith carried him forward. And though his steps were unsteady, his heart was drawn by the one who stood before him, calm and unshaken. And so, step by trembling step, he walked. Upon waters that only moments before had been his greatest fear. Peter's steps carried him forward. Each one a miracle. Each one a defiance of everything he had ever known about the sea. The waters, restless beneath him, bowed to the word that had been spoken. The storm, fierce and unrelenting, could not undo the power of that simple command.
Come.
For a moment, his gaze was steady, fixed upon the one before him. The face that held peace even in the storm. The eyes that carried both strength and mercy. Each step drew him closer. The distance between them narrowing. The impossible made real with every trembling motion. But then, a gust of wind roared against him. Spray stung his eyes. The thunder cracked above. The sea, no longer background to his faith, demanded his attention. The waves rose like dark walls beside him. The waters beneath his feet surged and shifted. And his heart wavered. He looked around. He saw the violence of the storm. He felt the force of the wind. He measured the impossibility of his steps. And in that turning of his gaze, faith faltered. Doubt crept in, whispering of what could not be. Of what should not be. The waters that had held him began to yield. His feet sank. The unseen foundation crumbled. The sea, relentless and deep, pulled him downward. Panic seized him. His arms flailed. The waves closed around his body. From his lips burst a cry. Raw, desperate, stripped of all but need. Lord, save me. It was not polished, not measured, not eloquent, but it was enough. For faith, even when small, even when clothed in fear, still clings to the right one. And before the waters could claim him, a hand reached out. Strong, steady, unwavering. It caught him, lifted him, held him. The grip was sure, unbreakable. A grasp that no wave could pry loose. Peter's eyes, wide with fear, met the gaze of his Lord. And in that gaze he saw not condemnation, but compassion. Not rejection, but rescue. The voice came again, gentle yet piercing, carrying both truth and love. O you of little faith! Why did you doubt? The words were not spoken to wound, but to teach. Not to shame, but to shape. For in that moment, Peter understood that faith was not about his strength, but about keeping his eyes fixed upon the one who called. The storm still raged around them, yet in his hand Peter was safe. Fear still pressed against them, yet in his presence Peter was upheld. The sea still threatened, yet its power was broken by the one who ruled above it. Together they turned back toward the boat. Step by step across the waves. The storm could not hinder them. The waters could not overwhelm them. For the Lord of the storm had reached into the depths and lifted his child to safety. And as they drew near, the disciples leaned forward, their hearts pounding with awe, their eyes filled with reverence. They had seen fear. They had seen doubt. But greater still, they had seen the mercy that rescues in weakness. The mercy that answers the cry, "Lord, save me." And within that mercy lay the lesson they would carry forever. That even when faith falters, even when doubt threatens to drown, his hand is near, his grip unyielding, his presence unshaken. The water that had risen around Peter now dripped from his garments. The sting of fear still lingered in his chest. The memory of sinking still pressed heavy upon his mind. Yet the hand that had lifted him was firm, unshaken, stronger than the waves themselves. He had doubted, and doubt had drawn him downward. But grace had reached deeper than doubt. Grace had rescued him from the depths. The disciples in the boat had watched every moment, their eyes wide, their hearts torn between fear and wonder. They had seen him step onto the waters. They had seen him walk where no man should walk. They had seen him falter, his faith bending beneath the weight of fear. And then they had seen the hand of their Lord, stretched out, unfailing, grasping him and raising him again. Doubt had dragged him low. Yet the mercy of Christ had lifted him higher than he could ever have stood alone. And as Peter's trembling hand clung to the arm that saved him, he understood. That faith was never about his ability to walk, never about his strength to endure, never about his courage in the storm. It was about the one who had called, the one whose word held the waters firm, the one whose hand never failed. The storm still raged around them, but Peter's heart now carried a lesson carved deep. That doubt, when entertained, will always sink the soul. But doubt is never the end. For grace is greater, always greater. Every gust of wind became a reminder, every crash of wave a testimony, that the storm could reveal weakness, but it could not overcome mercy. Peter had looked away and fallen, but the Savior had not looked away from him. Peter had felt himself swallowed by fear, but Christ had already reached for him before the sea could close its grip. And so it is for every soul that trembles in the storms of life. Doubt may rise. Fear may press hard. Faith may falter, but the grace of God reaches deeper. Always deeper. Deeper than the waves. Stronger than the winds. Surer than the ground we walk upon. The disciples' eyes filled with awe as the two drew nearer the boat. They did not see a failure in Peter. They saw a miracle in the mercy of Christ. They saw that even the faltering are not forsaken. Even the doubting are not abandoned. Even the sinking are not beyond the reach of his hand. And as they leaned to pull them both into the boat, their hearts swelled with reverence. For they understood, perhaps more clearly than ever before, the nature of the one they followed. He was not merely a teacher of wisdom, not merely a prophet of power. He was the Lord of mercy, the Savior who rescues, the hand that never fails. And in that truth, they found peace. A peace that lingered even as the storm continued. A peace that whispered that doubt may drag down, but grace will always lift up. A peace that reminded them that faith is not about never faltering, but about knowing who to cry out to when we do. The sea still roared around them. Yet within their souls, a deeper calm began to grow. For they had seen the strength of his hand. They had felt the power of his presence. They had witnessed the mercy that saves. And that mercy, they knew, would never fail them. Not in this storm. Not in any storm to come. The storm had not yet yielded when Peter and his Lord drew close to the boat. The wind still roared, the waves still slapped against the vessel's sides, spray rising high into the night. The disciples reached out, their arms straining, their eyes fixed upon the two figures making their way through the chaos. And then, together, they stepped in. The moment his foot touched the wood, the storm broke. The winds bowed into silence. The waves sank into calm. The sea, moments before wild with fury, stretched out flat and still as glass. The disciples fell back in stunned reverence. Breathless, trembling, undone by what their eyes beheld. It was not gradual. It was not slow. It was instant. Absolute. Sovereign. One heartbeat filled with terror. The next washed in peace. The storm, which moments before had seemed invincible, vanished before his presence as though it had never been. Peter, still damp, still shaking, sank down among his brothers, his chest rising with ragged breath. He had felt the weight of the waters. He had tasted the bitterness of doubt. He had cried out from the depths. And he had been rescued. And now, safe in the boat, he looked upon the one who had saved him, his heart overwhelmed by mercy and awe. The others, too, could scarcely speak. Their minds replayed the sight of him upon the waters, steady amidst the chaos. Their ears still rang with the voice that had pierced the storm. Their souls bowed low before the revelation. They had seen his miracles before, but never had they felt so small, so undone, so certain of who he was. One by one, their whispers rose. Trembling words, confessions born of wonder. Truly, you are the Son of God. The declaration was not spoken lightly. It was the cry of souls that had seen the glory of the Lord in the midst of their fear. The storm had tested them, stripped them, revealed them. And in its breaking, it had unveiled him. Not only as master of miracles, not only as teacher of truth, but as the very Son of God, sovereign over creation, Savior of souls. The calm of the sea deepened, spreading like a hush across the world. The stars shone brighter, freed from the veil of storm. The moon cast its silver path across the still waters. And within the boat, hearts that had once trembled now bowed in worship. Peter clutched the side of the vessel, the memory of sinking still vivid, but the greater memory of being lifted more enduring. The others watched in silence, their eyes fixed upon their Lord, unable to look away. The storm had been mighty, but his presence was mightier still. And as the boat glided forward upon the calm waters, carried by the unseen hand of the tide, they knew they had been changed. Not simply because the storm had ceased, but because they had seen him as he truly was. This moment would remain with them forever, etched into memory, sealed into their souls. The night when he revealed his glory upon the waters. The night when doubt was swallowed by mercy. The night when fear was replaced by worship. And as the silence settled, as peace wrapped around them like a mantle, one truth lingered in every heart. That no storm is stronger than his word. No wave higher than his hand. No darkness deeper than his presence. For he is the Son of God, the one who saves, the Lord of every storm. The storm that had once roared so fiercely was gone. Its voice silenced, its fury vanished as though it had never been. The waves, which had towered over them, now lay gentle. The restless waters turned into a vast mirror, reflecting the soft glow of the moon. The wind, which had torn at their garments and lashed against their faces, now drifted as a tender breeze. Cool, refreshing, carrying with it the quiet fragrance of peace. The disciples sat in awe, scarcely able to breathe. Their hearts still pounding, not with fear, but with wonder. A moment before, they had been certain of death. Now, they were wrapped in life. A moment before, their cries had been lost in chaos. Now, silence itself seemed to sing of his power. The sea had been their greatest threat. And now, in his presence, it became their quiet refuge. The storm had been their terror. And now, it became their teacher. For in the breaking of the storm, they had seen not only his power over creation, but his power to bring peace to their very souls. Every man aboard the boat felt it. A peace that reached deeper than the surface of the waters. It was not merely the absence of wind, not simply the stilling of waves. It was a peace that touched the heart. A peace that whispered to fear, "Be still." A peace that entered their weary bones, their trembling hands, their restless minds. They had cried out for safety. But what he had given them was more than safety. He had given them himself. And in his presence, peace was not temporary. Peace was eternal. The night stretched quietly around them. The stars above shone with new brilliance. The heavens, once veiled by storm, now revealed their endless beauty. The air carried only the sounds of still waters lapping gently at the boat. The creak of wood adjusting to calm. The faint breaths of men finally at rest. The disciples leaned back, their eyes lifted heavenward. Their hearts bowed inward. Each of them carried the memory of fear, but also the greater memory of rescue. Each of them bore the weight of their weakness, but also the greater strength of his hand. The storm had been real. The danger true. But his peace had proven greater. And that peace did not end when the winds ceased. It lingered, it deepened, it became the foundation of their faith. For storms will come again. Waves will rise. Fears will return. But once the soul has seen the storm bow before him, it cannot forget. Once the heart has felt his peace enter in the midst of chaos, it will never be the same. The disciples knew this now. The peace they felt was not tied to calm waters. It was tied to him. The stillness that wrapped around them was not born of nature's change. It was born of his nearness. And so they rested, not in the quiet sea, but in the presence of their Lord. The one who had walked upon the waters. The one who had lifted Peter from the depths. The one who had silenced the storm with his very presence. The Son of God. The Prince of Peace. The Savior of souls. And as the boat drifted gently across the calm expanse, their bodies weary but their spirits renewed, they knew with certainty what they had only glimpsed before. That peace is not the absence of storms. It is the presence of Christ. The hush that followed the storm was holy. A silence so complete, so profound, it seemed as though all creation had bowed in reverence. The disciples sat still, their bodies heavy with exhaustion, yet their hearts alive with wonder. No one dared to break the quiet quickly. For the presence of their Lord filled the boat more powerfully than the wind had ever filled the sails. Slowly, whispers rose among them. Soft at first, carried with trembling voices. Their eyes, wide with awe, did not leave him. The one who now sat calm, his robe still wet from the sea, his gaze steady and sure. And the words formed from the depth of their souls, words too strong to be silenced. Truly, you are the Son of God. It was not a thought half spoken. Not a question still searching. It was a confession. A revelation. They had seen him feed the multitudes. They had seen him heal the broken, restore the blind, raise the lame. But here, upon the waters, in the heart of the storm, his divinity shone with unshakable clarity. Every flash of lightning had revealed his glory. Every step upon the waves had declared his authority. Every word spoken had carried the weight of heaven. And now, in the silence of the calm, their hearts could no longer hold back the truth. He was not merely their teacher, not merely their master, not merely a prophet among men. He was the very Son of God. The confession rose not from one alone, but from all. Their voices mingling, their hearts uniting. The storm had stripped them of all pride, all certainty in themselves, all strength of their own. And in its place, it had left this truth: that he alone was worthy of worship. Peter, his garments heavy with water, his body weary from fear and rescue, bowed low. His lips trembled as he joined the others in worship. For he had felt both the sinking of doubt and the strength of mercy. He knew, more than ever, that without his Lord he was nothing. And with him, all things were possible. The others leaned forward. Some clasped their hands. Others lifted their faces heavenward. But every gesture was born of awe. Every breath an offering of reverence. They had faced death, and life had entered their midst. They had faced fear, and love had cast it out. They had faced the storm, and the Lord of all creation had stilled it with his presence. And so, in the stillness of that night, the boat became a sanctuary. Not a temple of stone, not a synagogue of walls, but a floating altar upon the calm sea. An altar where worship rose pure, unforced, uncontainable. Their voices, though quiet, carried weight eternal. Truly, you are the Son of God. The heavens themselves seemed to echo their confession. The stars shone brighter, the moon traced its silver path more clearly, the sea mirrored the glory above. All of creation bore witness to the truth revealed in their hearts. For when men encounter storms, they learn their frailty. But when men encounter the Lord of storms, they learn his glory. And in that revelation, worship is the only response. The disciples, once filled with terror, now rested in awe. The storm had brought them to the edge of despair. But it had also carried them into the depths of worship. And in that worship, their faith grew. Their trust deepened. Their hearts bowed before the truth that would never be shaken. The truth that the one in their boat was no mere man. He was the Son of God. Their Savior. Their Lord. The boat drifted quietly now. No storm, no fear, only the sound of still waters lapping softly against its sides. Yet within the disciples, something far greater than calm seas had taken root. Faith. Faith born not in ease, but in trial. Not in sunshine, but in storm. They had felt the winds claw at their bodies. They had seen the waves threaten to consume them. They had trembled, faltered, doubted. And still, they had been rescued. This was the lesson they carried deep into their hearts. That faith does not always look like strength. Often it looks like a trembling hand reaching for his. Faith is not the absence of fear. It is the trust to cry, "Lord, save me," when fear overwhelms. Faith is not walking perfectly upon the waters. It is keeping our eyes upon the one who calls us, even when the winds rage. The storm that night became more than memory. It became a mirror. For every storm that would come after, within their lives or within the lives of those who would follow, this night would whisper its truth. That storms will rise, unbidden and fierce. That waves will swell without warning. That darkness will sometimes cover the stars. But none of these are stronger than His presence. None of these greater than His hand. The disciples would face many storms yet. Storms of persecution, storms of rejection, storms of their own weakness and frailty. Each would test them. Each would stretch their faith. Yet the memory of this night would remain. The memory of His steps upon the waters. His voice above the winds. His hand lifting from the depths. And so it is with all who hear this story. We too face storms. Storms not of wind and wave, but of worry and grief. Of sickness and loss. Of fear and uncertainty. They rise suddenly, they press heavily, they shake our fragile hearts. And like the disciples, we may sometimes feel alone, unseen, abandoned in the chaos. But this story whispers its eternal truth, that even when He seems far, He is near. Even when He seems silent, He is watchful. That the one who prayed upon the mountain sees the struggling boat. The one who walks upon the waters comes to his own in the storm. That His voice still speaks, "Take courage. It is I. Do not be afraid." Faith does not promise a life without storms. But faith promises a Lord within the storm. A hand that reaches. A voice that steadies. A presence that brings peace even before the winds grow calm. The disciples bowed in worship, confessing, "Truly, you are the Son of God." And that confession is the anchor for every heart that trembles in its own storm. For to know Him is to know that fear is never final. To trust Him is to know that no storm can claim victory over His love. So when the winds of life rise, when the waves of anxiety crash, when doubt drags the soul downward, remember this night. Remember the boat that trembled, the sea that raged, the faith that faltered, and above all, the Savior who rescued. And let that remembrance bring peace. Let it stir trust. Let it kindle faith anew. For the truth of that night has never faded. The Lord who walked upon the waters then walks with His children still. The sea carried them onward in stillness. The boat gliding smoothly as though guided by an unseen hand. The disciples, weary from struggle, leaned against the worn wood, their bodies heavy with fatigue. Yet their hearts, once crushed by fear, now rested in a peace they had never known before. The storm had not only been calmed outside of them, it had been calmed within them. They began to understand that peace is not something earned through strength. not something found in the absence of trouble. Peace is a gift, flowing from trust in the one who rules over all things. It comes when hands release their grip on fear, when hearts surrender the weight of worry, when souls rest not in their own ability, but in His care. The lesson was quiet but unshakable. They had labored at the oars, straining against the wind, fighting to save themselves. And all their strength had brought them no closer to safety. But when He entered the boat, everything changed. Not because they gained more power, but because His presence brought rest. This is the way of faith. To surrender is not defeat. It is trust. To release control is not weakness. It is wisdom. For the truest rest is found not when storms cease, but when the soul yields to the one who governs the storm. The disciples sat in silence, each man reflecting in his own heart. Some thought of the fear that had nearly undone them. Others of Peter's faltering steps. Still others of the moment the storm bowed before him. Yet all of them felt the same truth pressing gently upon their souls. That the safest place in all the world is not within the strongest vessel, nor upon the calmest sea, but in the presence of Christ. And so their breathing slowed. Their hearts settled. Their spirits leaned into peace. The night air, once filled with thunder and cries, now carried only the sound of gentle waters. The stars above, unveiled again, shone with quiet brilliance, as if heaven itself was testifying to the stillness given by His hand. This peace was not fleeting. It was not fragile. It was rooted in the eternal, in the unshakable reality of who He was. They had feared the storm, but now they knew the greater truth. That the one in their midst was Lord not only of the sea, but of their very lives. And so they rested, not merely in body, but in spirit. They let go of the striving, the frantic efforts, the anxious grasping. They yielded to His presence, His care, His love. And in that yielding, they found true rest. The night stretched gently onward. The boat drifted under the soft silver of the moon. And peace lingered like a blanket over their weary souls. They did not need to know what awaited them on the far shore. They did not need to see the path ahead. For the one who had brought them through the storm would surely bring them safely to their destination. And so they closed their eyes in the quiet, their minds at ease, their hearts surrendered. Trust had become their rest, and rest had become their worship. The night lay quiet, and in that quiet their souls turned inward. Hearts whispering prayers, not loud, not elaborate, but simple offerings born of gratitude. The disciples had no need for many words. Their very breath was prayer. Every beat of their hearts a confession of trust renewed. They had been brought to the edge of despair. They had felt fear rise like the waves. They had known the weight of doubt. Yet they had also seen His hand stretched to save. His presence calm the storm. His voice speak courage into trembling souls. And so their prayer that night was not only for safety, but for faith. Not only for calm waters, but for hearts forever anchored in Him. Their thoughts lifted heavenward. Lord, You are our refuge. When storms rise, You are our shelter. When fears press close, You are our peace. When doubts drag us down, You are the hand that lifts us. Truly, You are the Son of God. And in You, we will rest. The prayer flowed quietly, unspoken yet real. Each man resting his body against the boat, each mind drifting towards stillness. Yet their spirits leaning into His presence with trust deeper than before. This is the way of true prayer. Not always words, but surrender. Not always petitions, but worship. A laying down of burdens, a yielding of fear, a release of self into the hands of the One who holds all things. And so they prayed with their silence, with their peace, with their hearts bowed low. The storm had taught them that faith was fragile. Yet it had also taught them that His mercy was strong. And mercy, they now understood, was enough. The night deepened. The stars glimmered overhead, bright and watchful. The boat glided steadily, carried by calm waters. And their prayer became their rest. Keep us, Lord, in Your care. Guide us through every storm. Teach us to trust when fear rises. Lift us when we sink. And remind us always that You are near. The words faded into the rhythm of their breathing, the stillness of their hearts, the peace of the night. Prayer had become not an action, but a state of being. A quiet communion that lingered even as their eyes grew heavy with rest. And as they drifted into slumber, the peace of God, stronger than any storm, kept watch over them. The sea lay calm beneath the silver glow of the moon. The storm only a memory now, fading into the night like a distant echo. The disciples rested in the boat, their bodies weary, their eyes heavy, yet their spirits light with peace. Fear had pressed them hard, doubt had pulled them low, but mercy had lifted them higher than they had ever known. In the stillness, their hearts carried the truth that would never leave them. That storms are not greater than His presence. That waves are not stronger than His hand. That fear is never final when faith rests in Him. They had seen the waters bow beneath His steps. They had heard His voice rise above the winds. They had felt His hand save when doubt pulled them under. And they had confessed, with awe and reverence, "Truly, You are the Son of God." The boat moved gently onward, guided not by frantic effort, but by the calm that followed surrender. The stars above shone like watchful guardians, their light mirrored in the waters below. The night air wrapped around them softly, carrying the fragrance of peace. One by one, their eyes closed. One by one, their breathing slowed. One by one, they yielded to the rest their souls had found in Him. And so the story, born in storm, ended in silence. A silence not empty, but full. full of peace that passes understanding, full of trust that does not waver in the night, full of assurance that they were never alone, never unseen, never beyond his reach. This same peace lingers even now, for all who carry burdens, for all who face storms, for all who long for rest. The voice still speaks, as steady as it did upon the waters. Take courage. It is I. Do not be afraid. So let the heart rest in this truth tonight. Let fears drift away with the tide. Let worries dissolve into silence. Let every burden rest in his care. For the one who calmed the storm is the one who keeps watch still. Close your eyes now. Breathe deeply. Yield every thought into his keeping. And let the peace of Christ guard your heart as you sleep. The sea is calm. The night is gentle. His presence is near. Rest now. Rest deeply. Rest in him.